We are back today with some more NHL signings, including the Vancouver Canucks signing a pair of forwards and the Montreal Canadiens signing their 2020 first-round selection. We have all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some more NHL signings to talk about today. We have a combination again of RFAs, UFA, as well as a 2020 draft class member from the first round, which will kick things off here. The Montreal Canadiens have signed their 2020 first round selection, left shot defenseman here from the WHL, Kaiden Guhle. So Guhle gets his 3-year entry-level deal officially on the books here. Of course, the average annual value, $925,000. With his Schedule A and B bonuses that are built in here, he is able to earn over $4 million total over the life of the contract. So obviously, the lower you go down in the first round and into the draft, you get less bonus opportunities than the higher up, first couple of picks players, especially the first overall usually gets the most, and then slowly starts to, decrease a little bit from there. But obviously Guhle's a player who should have an opportunity here to have another big year of junior. Hopefully the Western Hockey League and the junior leagues can get going here and have a successful season. He should be in contention possibly for a spot at the World Juniors as well for Team Canada, which would be interesting to see how their roster takes form. I know a lot of the first round selections as well as drafted players from last year will have a really solid opportunity with the NHL not getting started until after the juniors are done. The World Juniors will be starting this year on Christmas Day instead of Boxing Day as well, but there'll be plenty more information coming on the World Juniors. We'll be covering the tournament quite closely, and we'll be doing a full preview and predictions and all that here. We still got lots of time now before we get into that stuff, but Guhle's officially under contract for the Habs. Could be a big part of their blue line into the future here. Now, as I mentioned, the Vancouver Canucks have also signed a pair of forwards. One was restricted free agent Adam Gaudette, who gets a 1-year deal, $950,000. Now, Gaudette was wasn't a full RFA, so he wasn't completely eligible for like an offer sheet, for example, because he didn't have enough games played. So he was a different form of a restricted free agent, but he gets his 1-year deal on the books here. So it's a good signing for Vancouver. Gaudette's a player who certainly still has a lot of potential and still kind of finding a real solid spot in the lineup here. But obviously, they need to round things out in the forward position, and he's a good signing for them. They bring in Jace Horolog as well, who's a former first-round selection from a few years back, originally drafted by the Florida Panthers. He did spend parts of last year with the Ottawa Senators, who I believe they picked him up on waivers at one point, and now he signs with Vancouver. Now his contract is a 2-way deal. He gets $800,000 at the NHL level, and obviously he'll make less in the minor league should he be demoted. But he's a player who hasn't had a whole lot of NHL success so far. So really, he's a player who still has a lot of potential. I imagine he's probably going to play in the American Hockey League system, but he does have enough NHL experience that he could certainly be a viable call-up option. But I really don't see him making a team out of training camp here, at least not to get started. Now, we also saw the Arizona Coyotes sign one of their main restricted free agents, and that's forward and center iceman Christian Fischer. Now, Fischer signs a 2-year contract. He gets $1 million per season, though, so not an overly big contract. And for the most part here, I think the Coyotes roster is pretty much intact. Based on comments from the new GM in Arizona, it kind of sounds like the roster they have very well could be the roster they go to training camp with. We may not see much more out of the Coyotes organization in terms of signings or trades. They really don't need to do a whole lot more. I mean, I guess we could still possibly see maybe a trade or two. I guess there's a lot of players there that were rumored to be on the block, and I guess if another team comes calling and is willing to offer up a decent pick, then maybe we'll see that, or maybe once training camp gets going and teams start evaluating, maybe at that point. But for the most part, I think the Coyotes roster you see today is what you'll see come training camp when they finally get started. We also have a signing for the Boston Bruins where they've signed Karson Kuhlman to a 2-year contract. It's also a 2-way deal, pays him $725,000 at the NHL level. So Kuhlman's another player, obviously kind of gone up and down between the American Hockey League and NHL for the Bruins organization. So certainly somebody who's had some decent showings for sure. It's certainly worth signing and keeping around here for the longer haul. So we'll see if he can develop into more of a full-time player for them during this contract. Minnesota Wild have signed defenseman Mccabe as well to a 1-year, 2-way contract, $700,000, just another depth piece. More than likely, Mccabe is somebody who can play in their American Hockey League system. At least that would be my guess, but they signed him to a one-year, two-way deal. And the Calgary Flames have added some much-needed depth. They signed former Boston Bruin Joakim Nordstrom to a one-year contract at $700,000. So that could prove to be a pretty valuable contract for Calgary. Somebody who can obviously play in their bottom six, maybe play in the PK, which is something that they were certainly needing to replace in their lineup. So pretty decent depth signing there by Brad Treliving and the Calgary Flames. Now, we're also in a situation here when it comes to signings that we're about to see arbitration hearings get underway here in short order. We'll probably be doing a video sometime either today or tomorrow kind of outlining which players have filed for arbitration and when the hearings are set up for it, so you can kind of get an idea when to expect to have those contracts announced. Of course, we might not see all of these players and teams end up going to arbitration. Many of them do come to terms beforehand, but on a couple of occasions here, the ones that are coming up quickly, we have the Ottawa Senators and Connor Brown. That hearing will be getting underway here in a couple of days. Right now, there seems to be a pretty big gap, whereas the Ottawa Senators are offering around $2.25 million, and Connor Brown's looking for about $4.8 million. So that's a major gap, well over $2 million, over $2.5 million. I would think that the ruling's probably going to come somewheres probably closer to what Brown's asking for, but maybe not in the middle either, probably on the upper part. But keep in mind with these arbitration rulings as well, a couple of things that are important here. Now, in Connor Brown's case, he's in his final year of being a restricted free agent because he is 1 year shy of meeting the eligibility to be an unrestricted free agent. So this contract can only be a one-year deal. Now, typically, if a player is earlier into their career, the award can either be a 1 or 2 year contract. And they can decide upon that, but in these cases where it's the final year being an RFA, it's a 1 year deal. So if they don't come to terms ahead of time, then they're going to end up with him on a 1 year deal and walk him right to free agency where they could possibly lose him for nothing. Now, I understand many people will obviously label Eugene Melnyk, the owner of the Senators, for being cheap, which I personally have done many times myself. This is not completely untrue, but in the same scenario here, though, they have a lot of prospects. They also have a fair bit of cap space, so they're not tight that way or anything. But they do have a ton of players that they're going to be needing to do their second contracts on in the next 1 or 2 years. So they do need to be cautious about how many other players they lock up too long for too much money, that kind of thing. But Brown's a player who's been gradually building up his career here. Obviously had a good start to Maple Leafs, got a chance to play a bigger role in Ottawa. We saw his point totals go up a fair bit, so he certainly deserves a raise. I'm just not sure he's going to deserve quite that much. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with the RFAs and the arbitration hearings too in this scenario, anything over $4.53 million, then the Senators can say, yeah, you know what, we're not taking that, and they can walk away and make him an unrestricted free agent. Now, they probably wouldn't want to lose Brown for nothing. That's not what they would be saying here, but keep in mind that this year's free agency, as we know, is a little bit different. And it's a scenario here where there's still some decent players that are unsigned. There's not a lot of teams with cap space available right now. You look at a guy like Mike Hoffman, who's a former 30-goal guy, still kind of weighing out his options, trying to find the best fit for the best money. You know, if they walk away from a Brown reward, let's say he gets closer to the 4.8 that he's looking for, and they walk away, making him UFA, doesn't mean they can't still circle back and sign him because he'd be unrestricted. He can go anywheres. But they could kind of put him in a predicament where they walk away from the award, which is one thing, and then put him in a situation where there's not many teams out there who would have the ability to sign him. Because look at all the other players that are waiting to get signed too that have no contracts yet. Not to say that there wouldn't be teams interested. I think a lot of teams would be interested in Connor Brown for the right price. But it just would kind of put the pressure on him. I think that's why they're going about it this way, is they know that with the landscape and the market the way it is, they kind of have a little bit more leverage than they normally would, because clearly he was a top player for them, putting up a lot of points. And really, for the most part, I think like I said, the award will be closer to what he is asking for, but it's a complicated situation. Now, the other one that we know is coming up quickly is the Maple Leafs and Ilia Mccabe. Mccabe and the Leafs were believed to be, I think there was about $1 million or so gap in their negotiations, because they have to file each side so that they can, the arbitrator can kind of see where both parties are at. They each can make their arguments as to why they feel that that should be the contract, and then the ruling comes afterwards. Now, keep in mind as well, like I said, players always go in probably higher than they should because they want to get paid as much as they can. And owners, as you know, are going to want to pay out as little as they can, get the best bargain, of course, because it's a business at the end of the day. So they're going to come in low. So it might seem insulting on one side. It might seem over-exaggerating on another side, but it's just the way it goes. There's normally always a gap, and they quite often end up coming somewhere in the middle. So if you're a fan of either of those teams, don't stress, or if you're a fan of any other players or teams that you know are going to arbitration soon, then clearly don't worry too much about it. Many of these players come to terms before that happens, and we've seen a lot of times when they do go to arbitration that the player and the team quite often do not have a long-term relationship after, because sometimes in those hearings some things are said and feelings are hurt, and sometimes it can be tough to repair the relationship and be professional enough to move on, because at the end of the day, like I said, they all kind of have their own thing they're looking for here, and it can get kind of dicey in there, so we'll see what happens. One quick correction as well, I mentioned in yesterday's videos that Ryan Pulock, the Islanders, wasn't arbitration eligible. It was pointed out to be by one of our great fans that he indeed is eligible, and he has filed for arbitration. That was my mistake. So Matt Barzal is not, and because we were talking about some key RFAs like Barzal and the guys from the Lightning like Cirelli and Sergachev and Chernak, because there's no rush. If there's no arbitration, those could really drag on for some time. Because there's no real need. I mean, we could end up in a situation where they can look after all their other business, try to clear out the money and all that stuff first. But Ryan Pulock is a player who is possibly heading to arbitration, just to clarify from yesterday's video. So that is all. So let me know your thoughts on these contracts, depending arbitration hearings, and we'll discuss further in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.